Let's talk about burnout prevention and self-care for wellness. As social workers, it's important, vital that you are able to do the amount of self-care that you need and recognize the signs of burnout when things are just starting to get too much, right? So first, we're going to really kind of assess what is burnout, what are the causes, how does this even happen? Then we're going to strategize a plan for research-based self-care, and we're going to do a lot of reflection. How does this show up in our lives, and what can we do about it? So make sure that you have a pen and some paper ready, because throughout this presentation, I'm going to give you some ways that you can reflect for yourself and write it down and really kind of see what is going on and what is it that needs to change in your life to reduce the amount of burnout you're experiencing. A little bit about me. I am a burnout survivor. So I've been in social work for 9 years now, primarily in the medical setting. I also do private therapy now. My specialties are anxiety management, burnout, and life transitions. I am the podcast host of the Social Workers Rise podcast, founder of the Rise Directory for Clinical Supervision. I love my coffee, love the ocean, and I learned a lot of lessons throughout my time as a burnout survivor. So there's really 3 steps to overcoming burnout that we're going to talk about today. 1 is the awareness, 2 is the action, and 3 is taking action consistently. So let's dive into the awareness. There's a lot of stressors that we face as social workers, as humans, as people just living within these broken systems, right? And every stressor that we have, while one in and of itself may not be a lot, it may be overwhelming, right? But we're carrying a lot of these stressors on our shoulders, and the stress is literally being carried around in our body until we're able to take action to process the stress and let it go. The moment that I realized that it was time for myself to take a break was when I became just completely burnt out. And I had missed all my red flags, right? We're going to talk about the burnout red flags today. I had missed all of them. I was a social worker. I kept telling myself, I just love my job. I love my clients. I'm never going to get burnt out. And that was just me in denial. I just got to a point where I felt stuck, constantly having to go, that I didn't feel like I could take a break because I had to continue going just to make the ends meet. I was working so hard and not getting anywhere, just working to continue. And this made me show up with a lack of mental and physical energy, to the point that on the weekends, I didn't have the desire to go out with my friends, to spend time with my family. I was just trying to recover from the week. And then on Sunday, I'm just trying to rest up because I know that there is a week ahead. So just always feeling a sense of depletion and really just showing up as my worst. I was so irritable. I was cranky. I'm just always thinking like, all right, what's the next thing? Come on, let's hurry up. Let's go. And this is not helpful when you're trying to be an efficient communicator, because you're just feeling so overwhelmed to the point that you just want to hide under your blankets. And I don't know if you've ever been there, but if you have, then this is for you. You're in the right place, especially if you are there now. Because before we can fix the problem, we need to be aware of it. So what is burnout? Burnout is actually a medical syndrome defined as a state of mental and or physical exhaustion caused by excessive and prolonged stress. So your doctor can officially diagnose you as burnt out. And we really need to take a moment to reflect and acknowledge that this is excessive and prolonged stress. So just because you have a bad day or a bad week, or you have finals, it doesn't mean that you're burnt out. But if you are constantly experiencing the stress and never give yourself the chance to decompress and to bring your body back down to baseline, then yes, you're at very high risk of burnout. And I want you to know that it's not your fault. Not all of it. Some of the things we can control, and some of the things are out of our control. And we're going to talk about that as well. This is really the recipe for burnout, right? Especially if we're working in highly toxic workplaces, if there's high exposure to trauma in the work that we do with clients, and also too, especially if we have a high background of trauma ourselves. So ACE is adverse childhood experiences. And if you have a high ACE score, which you can, look this up separately, but if you have a high ACE score, then this is likely going to contribute to your risk of burnout, right? So there's kind of three different pillars. There's the workplace systems that are going on. There's our individual factors that we can control. And then there's also the skills that we bring to our career. And we'll talk about each one of these as well. So as far as the causes of burnout in the workplace and systems that we're in, if we're working in a place that has unrealistic work expectations, where they want us to see 8 clients in 8 hours and get all of our documentation done and not take any overtime, that's likely not going to happen. Not very realistic. And this puts a lot of pressure on us to perform. And we start thinking, okay, maybe there's something wrong with me, because if my boss expects me to do these things, then I feel like I should be able to do them, right? This is what I agreed to do when I started my job. But a lot of times working in various environments, there's the expectations that we can do things that are just not possible. And this is the system trying to get as much out of you as they possibly can. And just know there's always going to be someone who needs your help. There's always going to be another client. There's always going to be another crisis. But that doesn't mean that it has to always be you to respond, right? So unrealistic expectations, long work hours. If you're constantly working over your 8 hours and this was not agreed upon, this can definitely increase your chances of burnout. If you have a high exposure to trauma in your workplace, so maybe you work with domestic violence, people who have experienced domestic violence, or maybe you're exposed to stories of people who have been traumatized, right? And trauma can be anything that's overwhelming to the system, right? So sexual trauma, physical trauma, accident, there's a time that there is a risk to your life or a serious risk to your safety. Poor work-life balance. If you find that you are constantly giving all of your energy to work, and by the time you get home, that there's just no energy left, then that's going to lead to a poor work-life balance. Or if you're the kind to not want to take vacation, or if your employer doesn't support you taking vacation through the policies. For example, sometimes work will not have somebody cover for you. So if you want to be out for a week at a time, then you have to work your tail off the whole week before this, and then the whole week after that, just to prepare for your vacation and then recover and catch up on all the work that was just left there. That is not supporting you taking vacation, right? If there's no one to cover for you, then it can be more stressful leaving than it is actually taking your vacation, right? So the benefit of the vacation is not outweighed by the workload that you're looking at. And the leadership can be unsupportive if they're reinforcing these different workplace traits, then that can definitely contribute to burnout. And also politics, especially if it's going to be an election year, or if we're feeling a sense of psychological or physical, like if we're feeling unsafe, right, psychologically or physically, that can definitely increase our chances of burnout. Individual factors. So boundaries is huge. And boundaries is essentially the rules that kind of govern how you interact with the world and how other people interact with you. And there's all sorts of different boundaries. We could go into a whole training on just boundaries. But the important thing is to really set in place rules or guidelines for yourself that you're going to follow that are going to increase your chances or like increase your ability to have the good work life balance, right? To be able to leave work at work and be able to enjoy your time off, to have that space for mental health, to have that time for rest, to take your lunches, to drink water, to make time to have the energy to have fun, right? Self-awareness. So are how aware are you of what you need, right? When I first became burnt out, I had very limited self-awareness that this was even happening, which is very common because we get into this mode, this tunnel vision that we just need to keep going, going, going. And we don't stop to acknowledge how we're feeling. And we suppress it or we deny it, or we just say, like, look, I'm just going to get over it, right? Self-care, if you are making time for self-care, that is going to significantly reduce your chances of burnout. Family obligations can be very stressful. So, especially if you are maybe the main income provider, or if you're taking care of your parents, if you're taking care of siblings, if you are sending money to your family, all of these things can be very, very stressful. Finances, social work is not known for having the best pay, right? So a lot of times our finances of not making a lot of money at work, coupled with high student loans, can really, really add to our stress. Additionally, a history of trauma. So, and we're going to talk about this more in depth, but if we have a history of chronic trauma where maybe we were the ones that were taking care of other people, maybe we had to take care of our siblings or watch out for the well-being of our adult caregiver, then we learn to really suppress how we're feeling for the needs of others. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. Additionally, career skills. So if you're lacking confidence in your career skills, if you don't feel like you got adequate training for the job that you are tasked with, if you feel like the university or your internship was not able to provide a well-rounded experience or an in-depth experience of what you need now, then that can really, really hinder your ability to fully show up at your job and for your clients. Communication, if you're not able to communicate clearly or in a calm manner or be assertive in what you need, right? Communicate assertively for what it is that you need for setting those boundaries, then this can be a really, really big factor contributing to burnout. So as far as a workplace, these are the types of workplace characteristics that are going to increase your risk for burnout. The more that you have, the higher chances you have of burning out, right? The workload imbalance, where we feel like it's just not possible to get done. There's no work-life balance, right? There's a lack of control in your work, meaning that you're not able to exercise your clinical expertise and go with that and find confidence in your own judgment, but that maybe your supervisor is always dictating exactly what they're doing and micromanaging everything that you do and all the decisions that you make. Your personal and work values are not aligned. This is also known as moral distress. So this can happen, for example, if we're working in child protective services, where we're tasked with going in there and legally, maybe they say we need to remove the child from the mother. But personally, our personal values say, well, that's not the whole story. And your work says one thing, but your personal values say another thing. And this happens a lot in all sorts of different settings where your work says to do X, Y, and Z. And personally, you feel like that's wrong. It's a violation of your own personal values that can come into conflict and increase your risk for burnout. Fairness and equity on the job is missing. So if you feel like other people are getting promoted more than you, if you feel like you're being treated unfairly, if you feel like there's not an equitable pay for the work that you're doing, that's going to contribute. A lack of reward through recognition and acknowledgement. So this is when you're working your tushy off and nobody seems to notice. You are doing your best, you're going above and beyond, and people are just thankless. They're not acknowledging the hard work that you're doing. They're not acknowledging or celebrating the wins that you're having. Even if they're small wins, then that's going to make a big difference. And your sense of community is missing. So there's a huge, huge benefit to having colleagues and coworkers that you trust, that you can rely on, that you can talk to about the work that you're doing, your clients, and just overall how you're feeling. If that sense of community is missing, if you feel like you're a lone wolf out there, then the chances of you burning out are a lot higher. So I'm wondering, with all of that said, I'm wondering if you've noticed that a lot of people who do feel burnout or experience this, it's because they're tending to put others first. They're giving more to family, to clients, and to their work than they do themselves. They're prioritizing everybody else's needs. And then whatever energy is left, if any, then that's what they're going to give back to themselves, right? This can definitely be a trauma response. Not always, not necessarily, but it could be, and it's worth something to consider for yourself, right? So more than 23% of social workers report a high exposure to trauma and instability as children. And this is significantly higher than most populations. So studies do show that there is a relationship between childhood trauma and burnout. Physicians, for example, with an ACE score, adverse childhood experiences, score of 4 or more, had more than 2.5 times the risk of burnout. If this is true for physicians, then if we also have a high ACE score, then we are more likely to burn out as well. High ACEs were negatively associated with wellness and workplace issues, meaning that if you have a high ACE score, you're more likely to do poor in wellness, and you're more likely to have workplace issues, including experiencing issues with your physical health, your mental health, abusing alcohol and drugs, using tobacco, having poor sleep, and experiencing increased workplace stress. So I'm wondering, just kind of going through, how many red flags did you see for yourself? And we'll kind of go back to that list. But out of these 6, how many are there for you, right? And just be aware and notice that. And if needed, take action. Next, we're going to differentiate between burnout and the other issues that come up within the field of social work. And there is a difference. It's not always burnout, right? So the first one is compassion fatigue. This is a symptom of burnout. This tends to happen early on in the burnout stage because remember, burnout is a prolonged period of unmanaged stress, right? So compassion fatigue happens kind of earlier on in that process. And it's the physical, emotional, and or spiritual fatigue that takes over a person and causes them to have a reduced sense of joy in caring for others. So when, for example, if you really enjoyed working with kids and then you find that when the kids come in, you're kind of feeling irritated, like, ugh, gosh, I still have to catch up on my notes from yesterday. And this other kid really annoys me. I know has a bad home life, but man, he just gets on my nerves. And you're no longer finding that joy that you once did when you first started, right? That's compassion fatigue. Moral injury, we kind of touched on this earlier, is the damage done to your own moral compass as a result of perpetuating, witnessing, or failing to prevent things that go against your own moral and ethical code. For example, if I'm working as a social worker in a nursing home and I see that the nurses are understaffed and there's constantly patients who are basically being neglected, right? Maybe they have to sit in their own waste because there's not someone to help them to the bathroom in time. Or maybe they're in pain because there's not someone to respond quickly enough with the pain medication. And the administration is saying, well, that's just how it is. That's just how this industry is. And you just have to go and support them. And don't talk bad about our agency, right? But morally, it weighs on me that I have to see people who are in this situation who are vulnerable and are maybe being taken advantage of, even, right? If they're paying for these services, or if the families are coming in saying, hey, why aren't these services being done? If I'm asked to lie about it, right, that can cause a conflict between what my work is asking me to do and what my own moral values say is right. And finally, there's vicarious trauma. So this is what happens when we are exposed to trauma that our clients are experiencing. And this doesn't even have to be like a direct exposure, right? I don't have to physically be there. But if my client comes in and tells me about their rape or tells me about how they saw their mom get hit by their father, right? By hearing these traumatic stories, I can then experience my own symptoms of trauma, as far as maybe flashbacks, nightmares, racing thoughts, intrusive thoughts, right? So that can happen, and it's called vicarious trauma, and also very common if you are working with people who have been exposed to trauma. So this is the burnout iceberg. And at the top, what we see is burnout, but underneath it, it's so much more than that, right? There's so much more going on. And that's why there's not one thing that I can tell you in order to stop burnout or to get out of it. There's all of these different things, and it's important to be able to differentiate what exactly is going on. And once we have this awareness piece of what is going on, that's when we can take the strategic action to help alleviate it. And this is another way of looking at burnout, is it's a gradual slip. At first, we start out with just kind of feeling incompetent. We feel like we're not really getting anywhere. We're not achieving anything. We're not really helping anybody. Starting to question, like, why am I even here? Am I actually making a difference? I don't know. And then after that, it goes into cynicism, where maybe you'll just put little to no effort or energy towards doing your work. You're just doing the bare minimum because you're really just trying to get by. You're really just trying to work so that you can connect the pieces and just get through the day. And through this, we're not doing much self-care, most likely. And at the end is just emotional exhaustion, stress, and even health problems. I've talked to a handful of people who have ended up in the hospital because of burnout, because of ongoing stress. They have had heart attacks, they had strokes, they suffered exhaustion, they passed out. So there's a lot of serious consequences that can happen to you if we're not doing the self-care, if we're not taking care of our bodies and our minds the way that we need to. It's very important. So when we talk about self-care, I want you to kind of think for yourself, what is it that gets in the way of your self-care? Before we go into that, I know for a lot of people, you're probably going to say time. I don't have the time to do self-care. Money. I don't have time to be going to the spa and getting all these massages, right? I don't have the money to be taking these big vacations to get away. Also, too, there could be the guilt. So a lot of times people might actually feel guilty around taking time off because they feel that their clients need them, that they have to be there for their clients, that they can't just disappear for a little bit from their family, right? We can't take an hour a week to go to the gym or do a class because your family needs you there, right? What would happen if I wasn't there, right? So a lot of different things that get in the way of self-care. Also, too, the need to be productive, the need to constantly be producing in order to see yourself as valuable. A lot of times we find our value in what we produce. And so when we talk about pausing and taking a break, sometimes the story in our head can say, well, that's lazy. I don't deserve that. And it's a waste of time, right? So if you're one of those, like, it's a waste of time, I want to just kind of bring up this example. So this is an electric car, a Tesla. Very, very good, right? Runs on electricity, goes super fast. But after, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 hours of working hard, driving down the road, it needs a recharge, right? At least a good 30-minute break, if not more, to recharge. And we don't seem to have a problem with this. We don't consider the Tesla wasting time because they need a recharge, because we know that once it gets the juice that it needs, once we can replenish the energy, then it's good to go. But somehow it's different for you as a human. If you are working and giving your all for 4 or 5 hours straight, you somehow think that you recharging for 30 minutes is a waste of time. So something to think about there, and a reframe, right? So these are the things that often gets in our way of self-care. And adding, we can also have pressure from colleagues or bosses to not do self-care, right? If we're seeing that in our culture at work, that they're not taking their breaks, they work through lunch, they stay after the workday has ended to finish their work. By you setting these boundaries and saying, hey, going on my lunch, or all right, it's that time, it's the end of the day, I'm out, I've done all that I can do today, you might get some pushback for that. And you have to be able to recognize and be able to say, like, is that what I need? And am I more important than my productivity numbers at work, right? A lot of times we have the demands of our family responsibility. So many times I would come home exhausted from work, and then my family needs me, right? They need me to cook dinner. They need me to clean the house. They need me to do bath time. They need me to answer all these questions. They need me to help with homework. And there's just a lot of demands of family, right? Or we just don't prioritize self-care for ourselves for any number of reasons. We just don't make it important enough. So I want you to really shift your thinking about this. If you're saying there's no time, where can you make time? Where can you create time? What can you move around? What can you get off of your to-do list? Where can you make the time to do it? If you feel like you don't have any money, we're going to talk about a lot of self-care today that is free. Because the most effective self-care, what I call soul care, that doesn't cost money. It doesn't. And I'm not talking about going to a spa and taking some fancy vacation. When I talk about self-care, I'm talking about what you need as a human being, right? How are we created? We weren't created with spas and lattes, right? But we were created with humans with nervous systems. How do we bring that stress back down? If you're feeling guilty about your self-care, I want you to consider, how does you being your best benefit others? Or how does you not being your best harm others? Are you missing things at work? Are you not giving your all to your clients? Are you not helping them feel seen? Are you not taking the time and spending the energy with them that they need in that moment? Because oftentimes our clients are coming to us in the worst possible time in their life. They need us to show up at our best, whatever that best might look like. So how does you replenishing yourself, how does that benefit others? How does this set a good example for others, especially if you're a leader? How does it set a good example? And what are people learning from your actions? Because actions speak way louder than words. If you are a boss or a leader and saying, yeah, do self-care, take your time, but yet you're responding to emails at midnight, or you are taking calls on vacation, those actions are going to be speaking louder to your team about what's expected of them. If you're feeling pressure from your colleague, your boss, to not do self-care, to not take care of yourself, I would really question, is this workplace a good fit? If one of your priorities is spending time with family, having energy for fun, being healthy, I would question if that workplace is a good fit for you anymore. If you're facing demands of family responsibilities, I would question, who else can help you? Is there anybody else that can help you? And if it's just not a priority, I would encourage you to reflect and say, if you continue down this road that you're doing, what happens if nothing changes? Are you going to be one of those people calling me from the emergency department because you passed out from exhaustion, because you had a stroke a couple years down the line, right? Because you have a heart attack, because you're not making time to exercise, you're not making time to do the things that you know you need to do for your own wellness. And instead, you are just giving all of your energy to a system that's not going to reciprocate. And I want you to really just reflect on that. What do you envision your life like? If you're sitting in this rocking chair, picture you sitting there and picture yourself, I don't know, years into the future. You've retired, you're at the end of your life, whatever that might be. Maybe you're 100 years old, right? You're 100 years old, sitting in this rocking chair, relaxing, and you're reminiscing on your life. What is it that you want to remember? Do you want to remember all those overtime hours that you spent at your job? Do you want to remember trying to please your boss, who never seems to be satisfied with anything you're doing? Do you want to remember being sick and in pain? Or do you want to remember a balanced life where you get to spend time with family, where you feel healthy, where you feel good about yourself, where you're able to create memories, where you're able to stop those generational habits of just working and hustling until you have a heart attack? Do you want to be able to enjoy your retirement and be healthy? Whatever that vision is for you, no judgment here. But now is the time to start making steps towards that vision, because whatever your vision is like, whatever you want to be remembering your life like, this is now. You need to take the steps now to make that vision a reality. So we have the antidote to burnout. It's up to you to take action. Knowledge is power only if you act on it. So it's actually potential power. You have to be able to show up, and you have to be able to find the direction that you're going, right? So make sure that your values are in alignment. Make sure that whatever it is that you envision at the end of your life, that we're taking steps to go in that direction. So first, here's an activity for you to do. This is the very first thing that I did when I realized I was burnt out. And when I was burnt out, I realized when I was doing my chores, I was washing the dishes, and my husband says, honey, why don't you come and watch a movie with us tonight? Because he could see the change in my personality. He could see that I'm irritated. He could see that I'm stressed out, see that I'm not really spending quality time with the family. And he missed me, right? And he invites me to a movie. And my response was to break down crying and get mad at him. Like, how dare you ask me to come watch a movie because I have all of these other things to do? And essentially saying that all of these other things are more important and that I have to keep going and going and going, and that his time and his energy essentially was being taken advantage of, assuming that he's always going to be there, even if I'm not making time for fun, right? If I'm not taking time to nurture those relationships. So I had to really sit down and think like, okay, what do I want my life to look like? What are my values? So for you, I want you to just pause this and rank your values in order of, 1 to whatever, right? 1 to 5, maybe. What are your top 5 values? And when you're looking at your list, I want you to make sure that you're prioritizing your values in your calendar, in your agenda. So if your values are, I want to be healthy, I want to have a good relationship with my family, spirituality is important to me, right? Your calendar needs to reflect those values. So go ahead and pause and take some time to reflect on that. If you don't want to do it now, at least do it soon. So a note on boundaries. 20 years from now, the only people who remember that you worked late are your kids. No, your boss is not going to remember that you worked late. You're going to kind of see this just as part of your career, but your kids are going to remember, yeah, I remember my parent was always gone and they were always exhausted and they were always irritated after work. And it was hard to form that connection. It was hard to get the homework help. It was hard to have a good conversation. So we learned to just kind of go our own ways, right? So boundaries are going to be very, very important in establishing these self-care routines, right? And I want you to just kind of think about what kind of boundaries do you have right now and what do you need to improve on? So the healthy boundaries can help you define, what is most important to you and what you're going to hold yourself responsible for. When you're considering your boundaries, really prioritize your values. Going back to that value list, what is it that is most important to you? What is going to be your space? You're going to have to say no to some things so that it allows you to be open to say yes to the things that are most important. Be able to decide what you're realistically able to do. A lot of times our bosses will say, hey, can you take on this? Or so-and-so just quit. Can you take on their caseload? And I would respond with something like, well, I'm already at max with my caseload and I'm at max with the quality of work that I'm able to provide. What would be the priority? Because if I take on this extra work, I'm not going to be able to provide a quality clinical or customer experience for my clients because I'm going to be stretched really thin. And that's going to realistically take the amount of energy and time down that I can spend with each person. Right. And you don't really need to explain your no's. So if there's something that comes up that's not in alignment with your top 3 to 5 values, you can say, that's not going to work for me right now, but thank you for considering me. Right? Or at work, at work, you might need to explain your no's, but it could just be something as simple as like, I'm not feeling up to happy hour tonight because I'm going to go home and be with my family. Or like, hey, will this work for you? Like, no, not actually going to work for me, but maybe next week. Right? So it just depends on your situation. This is not personalized advice. So just giving you some ideas to work with and really set that intention for your time off. So once that time off time comes for you, what this looks like is like, okay, I have 12 hours or 15 hours, whatever, however many hours I have off. I'm going to rest, relax, try to feed into myself, or it's the weekend. I'm going to make time for fun, right? So just taking a moment to say, what is it that I want to get from my time off work? So setting boundaries. These are some just examples of phrases that you can use with people to set those boundaries, right? And this is another activity that I really, really love and encourage you to do. I call it the wheel of balance. And you don't have to have this exact handout, but what you can do is draw a circle, draw what you see there, and draw a pie with how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different areas. And we're going to label each different area: your physical health, emotional health, spiritual or your purpose in life, your relationships, your career or your mission in life, and your money or finances. And within each of those sections, I want you to draw a line that's rating. How do you think you're doing in each area? So with physical health, if you think that you're about a 7, I would draw a line there. My emotional health, maybe I'm at a 4. I would draw a line there, and so on. And this is going to give you probably an awkward wheel. And just look at this and reflect that if we're kind of cruising through life and this is our wheel that we're trying to cruise along with, it can be kind of awkward. And having perfect balance is not realistic. It's constantly a work in progress, but this will give you a visualization of the areas that you are doing really well in and the areas that need more attention. So let's talk about effective self-care. What is it that really is going to reduce the stress in your mind and your body on a daily basis? So after much research into this area, I have discovered that these are like the main ways that we as humans can reduce the stress in our bodies and help make us feel better and re-energize ourselves. So after I had that episode of Burnout, I really reflected on my values and I thought, what is it? Like, what do I need to do? Because I don't have a lot of time here to be wasting on self-care that doesn't really help, right? But this is the secret sauce right here. And there's not one thing that's going to be the fix for you. It's likely going to be a mixture of different things. So the more that you can integrate all of these different areas, the better it's going to be for you. I will say, if you're going to start anywhere, start with movement and exercise, because that is going to be the fastest and most efficient way of reducing the stress in your body. And especially if it's something that is, like routine, like walking is kind of like getting you into a flow, getting your body into a flow. Same thing with yoga. Yoga is really great in connecting your mind and your body and your breath and noticing the impact that each of those has on each other. So consistency. Make sure that you are consistent with this, right? And it doesn't have to be everything. And notice these are things that you can do on a daily basis. You can integrate these into your routine somehow, right? And notice I did not include taking a major big vacation because I don't know about you, but that can kind of stress me out too. Planning flights, looking at hotels, looking at all the money going out of my bank account, right? So a big vacation isn't necessarily the fix for stress. It's all of these little things that we do on a daily basis that's going to help. So make sure that you're showing up for yourself on a consistent basis. And if you're a leader, these are ways that you can promote wellness within your own agency. What we want to see from our leaders are the green flags, right? And these are great questions or great points to bring up, even if you're doing an interview. And you can ask about these, how do you encourage staff to self-care? How are you able to respond to your staff when they're feeling stressed out or if they have a traumatic situation, right? Do you have any kind of mental health days that are available? So all of these are ways that we can help promote wellness within our organizations. And if you see that these are going on, really take a look at that culture and see what can be changed and when is it time to just move on. Because if you're entering into a culture with all of these red flags, likely the system was set up like that. And you as an individual are not going to be able to change it alone. So this is another tool that I use with clients. And it's really to help kind of reframe the stressors in your life. So a lot of times we can get stressed out about things that are out of our control, like the weather or what a politician is doing, right? Or what someone else is doing. And those are things that are out of our control. But what are in our control is where we want to be focusing on, right? What's in our control in any given situation that we can fix? So things like boundaries, where we spend our money, where we spend our time, the amount of self-care that we do. So go ahead and write down everything, and you don't have to have this handout, but you can draw your own circle on your own page. Write down things that are in your control, things that you can do something about, and things that are outside of your control. And if they're outside of your control, you can figure out what can I do to get some sort of control over them. But if they're completely outside, then okay, we have to be confident that we're going to be able to deal with these challenges as they come. So I'm wondering for you, do you tend to give more to others than to yourself? And just as a recap, that could be the possible trauma response learned from childhood, right? Because this is where when we are taking care of others, when we have to make dinner, we have to take care of our siblings, if we have to pay extra attention to how our parent is acting, right? Are they mad today? Are they happy today? How are we going to respond? What do we need to do? Do I need to be extra kind? Do I need to be extra nice? Do I need to make dinner? Do I need to clean the house? Right? Maybe it probably doesn't matter how you feel. Or maybe nobody took the time to ask you, how do you feel? Because it doesn't matter. You still had to do these things, right? And you learned to be more in tune with the needs and the emotions of other people than you are with yourself. And while that was helpful for a time, now you do need to really pay attention. Like, how am I feeling on any given daily basis, right? How do different people, different environments, how do they make me feel? How do they affect my energy level and my mood? So, knowing yourself, self-reflection and mindfulness is essentially just being aware of the present moment, right? While acknowledging and accepting your thoughts and feelings. And mindfulness is really, really powerful, especially in reducing stress and anxiety. And this is there's a whole, we could go for hours about mindfulness. There's a whole certification on mindfulness. So if it's something that you want to learn more about, look it up online. Go to YouTube, go to the internet. There's tons of resources, read books about it, tons of resources about mindfulness. But a simple way to kind of check in with yourself is just do a simple body scan. Start with your feet, go up to your legs, your tummy, your shoulders, your head, and just notice how each part of your body is feeling, and no judgment. We're just accepting this as fact. And if you need to respond in a certain way or need to do things, maybe you need to go to a yoga class, maybe you need to stretch out, whatever it is that you might need to do, then you can do that and respond. Because a lot of times we don't even take that time to really see like what is going on. And having this awareness of how you feel can give you a lot of valuable information and help keep you healthy. So if you're struggling with confidence, here is another tool that you can use. So list out the skills that you already have, all of them. Go crazy, even the small ones, right? We want to know, what is it that you bring to the table? Because no matter who you are or what you do, my 5-year-old brings skills to the table. So I know that you definitely have skills that you have that you're good at, right? And then, list the areas of improvement. So what are some ways that you want to grow in or learn more about? And then what kind of resources are available? So who do you know that might be doing these things already? Are there books that you can get? Are there trainings that you can watch? Is there a coach that you can connect with? Right? So what are the resources available to you to learn more about these areas of improvement? And that's going to increase your confidence over time. So with consistency, all of these different activities that we just went through are ways to rethink what you're doing for self-care and figure out, what's going to work best for you to be consistent. So tools for life challenges. We talked about the tools for life challenges. And I want you to really just increase the awareness and see, how many of these signs do you have right now? Because when burnout comes, this is how it shows up for us physically, right? Headaches, heart problems, upset stomach, obesity, problems getting pregnant, menstrual cycle changes, decreased sex drive. You get sick more often. It might be hard to fall asleep or stay asleep. How many of those do you have? And next is the emotional warning signs, right? Easily irritated. You're constantly tired, feeling exhausted. You're less efficient, less productive. You have to do things kind of over again because you messed them up the first time. Feeling depressed or anxious. You have self-doubt, imposter syndrome. You feel like you don't belong, like you're not educated enough, like you're not smart enough. Maybe you're withdrawing from your friends and family, or you might be feeling just mentally distant from your job, negative or cynical about your job. And being able to just kind of take these in for yourself, right? It has impacts on your relationships, right? You're going to have more conflicts with your colleagues, with your family, with your friends. You might even tune out of conversations with people in your life where it's like, hey, did you just hear what I said to you? Hello? Are you listening? Right? That doesn't help to make people or clients, feel valued. Also, too, you're not keeping your commitments, which is going to impact the trust that you have within your relationships. Other sign is that you're always thinking about work. After you come home, what could you have done differently? Right? You think about your work during your time off. You think about it while you're doing your chores. And also, too, like you might even imagine like the most worst case scenarios that are really just kind of bringing you down. So with this all said, My hope is that this short presentation has just brought an increased awareness of your own personal signs and symptoms of burnout, recognizing the difference between compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma, and moral injury. Identify how burnout impacts your life, your physical health, your mental well being, relationships, your career. And most importantly, you now have tools to reduce the symptoms of burnout and explore what deep level self care really is, and develop a plan of action to be consistent with this. So, if you have questions, you can reach me here. The best place would be via email, Catherine@socialworkersrise.com. Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed this continuing education course from Agents of Change. Want to earn your CE credits for this course? Visit agentsofchangetraining.com or the link in the description to purchase the course and take the post-test. If you're looking for more CEs, check out our unlimited plan. You will get unlimited access to 150 plus ASWB and NBCC approved continuing education courses for one low annual fee. We're always adding new courses. Did I mention we also have 5 free CE credits available too? Check it out at agentsofchangetraining.com.